Hello everybody, this is Taff coming in with another Taff's Word, and talking about the county. Buzzword at the moment, I think, is unity. Very much a case of trying to unite the fans, but that's what the message we're currently getting from the board of directors. And there's one in particular who I've actually spoken to, who is really trying to push it, and that is Rob Sanders. And fair play, I've had to take back some things that I said about Rob during the elections, calling him unelectable. I was sceptical as to how he would fit onto the board given the things that had happened before. Sceptical as to whether he would blend in as well, whether he'd be resented, so to speak. I'm glad to say I was pretty much wrong about that. It seems as though he's finding his feet on the board and pushing out this call of unity, which is something that I've got to push out myself, to be honest with you. It's something I've tried to push, but with the board of directors behind that message, I think I'm in a stronger position to actually push it. Unity. So what exactly do we mean by unity? Well, our fan base is segregated, it's factioned. There are different aspects of our supporters, different types of people who like to keep to people who they consider similar to them, completely ignoring the fact that we're all similar for the fact that we're there for the same reason. We're there to support Newport County Football Club, and I just don't get the segregation. I don't get why it's so diverse within our fan base. I can't see any reason why we can't let old bygones be bygones. Why we can't put differences aside for the sake of one thing that means a lot to us, and that's Newport County. Because I've mentioned this before, right? We put ourselves at a disadvantage to the clubs around us who have smaller attendances because their fans actually pull together. Now, there's two big things that give us a disadvantage financially. A segregated fan base that won't work together. That means any incentives just won't drive because there's not going to be enough people behind it, regardless of whether it's a good or a bad idea. It's a matter of, oh, I'm not doing it because it's him, and it's that group, And I think that's a bit of a sorry state for us to be in. I think you've got the likes of Morecambe, Accrington, perfect example. Just won the League Two title with one of the lower budgets. So why do you think they're able to do that? Well, the budget might not be as low as we think, but how are they able to raise that kind of money with such a small fan base? Morecambe obviously saved themselves by the skin of their teeth, but you got like a big supported club like Chesterfield going down, but we finished 11th and we're not as supported as Chesterfield. Chesterfield is a perfect example of everything around falling apart. Now, for me, our fan base were apart anyway. Whether you will look at a particular group as if they're a scum of the club because they like to be a bit provocative, they like to cause a bit of a stir, be a bit intimidating. Whether you look down on people because they get drunk at the football, whether they take the day out, to go to the pub and have a drink on the bus. Whether you look at a certain fan group for driving an initiative, like the Amber Army, the group that I'm a part of, driving an initiative to try and push the atmosphere with the sort of smug feeling of who do you think you are? Why should you be the ones driving the atmosphere? It's like, well, fair point. But why not anybody else? Why is no one else trying to do the same thing, if that's the case? Who else would drive the atmosphere if we didn't? You know what I mean? Whether people look at the supporters club and think, you're boring, you're a goody two-shoes group. Like I'm saying, like people who go on like the Cross Keys bus and the Riverside Tavern go and get drunk. People look, the goody two-shoes type people look down on them because they want to have a good drink that day. Whether, the people who go there and, as I said, provocative, and everybody looks down on them as if they're a shame to the club. End of the day, right, you got to look at our club, and then you got to look at everybody else's. Now, I can tell you something now, right? The FA are clamping down on us, but I can tell you something now. A lot worse happens at the bigger clubs. At the bigger clubs with the bigger attendances, the reason the Football League are clamping down on us is because with our 3,000 home fans, we should be able to control it. With a club who have 20,000 home fans, it's a lot more difficult to control. I don't know whether the FL have different rules for us and different rules for anybody else, but you see things going on all the time at the bigger clubs. You see clips on YouTube of flares and smoke bombs being let off by other clubs all the time. They'll do it in the concourse inside the stadium. They smash the place up. You know, they smash up toilets and everything like that when they go to away grounds. You see it all the time. You know, we're not a special club that the moment one person decides that they want to act remotely like that they should be an outcast. At the end of the day, football has its characters. Now, a few people are more rough around the edges than others, but at the end of the day, we're all there for one reason, and we're there to support the football club. Whether you feel as though you're privileged because you've done this and that for Newport County, whether you look at people who've done this and that for Newport County and think, well, who the hell do you think you are? Because, you know, if they're put on a pedestal by somebody else, then you're going to automatically dislike them. The thing is, I could fall into that bracket, right? I don't like being on any kind of pedestal. I'm not doing these blogs or running the Amber Army for any ego type things. It's not for me. I just want to push any incentive I can to improve something at the football club. And there's a lot of people out there who are doing the same thing but are resented for it. I think it's time for the cheap shots and the digs and the sly comments and things like that. I think it's time for all that to end. I think it's time for people to accept each other for who they are and just respect the fact that they're there for Newport County. Because at the end of the day, if we all actually work together, like for example, one group will put on an event and everybody thinks, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give them a chance this time for the good of the club and I'm going to support that event. It's going to be a lot more successful. I used to do events for the trust and people slapped, you know, an assumption on the events I did as a chavvy get-together. I just don't get the whole point. I mean, no one even turned, you know, rarely anybody turned up to these events. I used to get a handful of people who I knew and maybe a few others who sort of came along. I think the most supported event I ever did of the Supporters Trust was a Christmas do with Tony Pring, and we had Big Mac's Holy Soul Band, and it was just followers of the band who turned up for that. And it was a late notice thing. Yeah, the whole thing wasn't planned that well, but the rest of the events I did, I planned well, and they went really well. They were really good. They were really entertaining, and people would have really enjoyed them. But for some reason, people just didn't want to give them a chance. Now, I know that this is unearthing potentially a bit of bitterness on my part, but I'm not bitter about anything. At the end of the day, I know I did my best and I can hold my head up high. If it wasn't supported, well, it's just the club was misstate and the Supporters Trust was misstate, and other people need to sort of look at themselves on that, because I was an opportunity to support something that would have made the club money. Moving forward now, if the club puts out an event, I'd like to see members of every single supporters group and members of the fan base actually get behind it, because you turn up for the football. I mean, if we're looking at keeping hold of the club, or at least going with the hybrid option, we're still going to be expected to put money in on that case. So we need to start doing more to generate more funds. I mean, 3,000 people turn up. Can you imagine every single game, every person pulls a pound out of their pocket and pushes it into a bucket. Every single person who walks through the gate, every single home fan, 3,000 home fans average every single home game. What's 3 times 23? So that's 30k, 60k, 69k is it? I think 3,000 for 23 games. 69k straight away on top of everything else. 69k for everybody putting their hand in their pocket and giving £1 each. Now, you see what happens then when we start looking at £5 each. £5 each might be a stretch too far for some. So some may only be able to do the one. Some may be able to push it to 5, and some who have a better income maybe even push it to 10. So on average, if we can get £2 through every single game, this is just an example, this isn't an incentive or nothing. £2 on average per person every game as a donation every time they walk through the gate. What's £2? Not even a pint of beer. And £2, as I said, 69, that's 138k a year just by putting in £2 per person every game. Imagine if it was £3. Imagine we put on 5 or 6 events, which are a few pound to go in, and then everybody turns up, donates a little bit of money, buys raffle tickets, prizes are pushed out, everybody has a good time. 4 or 5 events like that on top of that, then you're pushing it towards the 170k then, if those events go well. And then other incentives like the halftime draw, if everybody decides to dig in and buy a halftime draw ticket, and we sell a few more then, bang, then there we're pushing towards the 200k mark, a halftime draw ticket as an example, sorry, I couldn't spit my word out then, an example. But then you got the county lottery, you got the rewards and benefits, which is a monthly fee that you pay. Our deficit at the moment is about 250k a season, and already just by throwing out a few theoreticals, we're already close to plugging that gap just by throwing out some theoreticals. How about every incentive going from every single supporters group is supported by each other as well? It's not going to take a lot for us, and it's not going to be a lot of money out of your pocket. We're talking about missing out on a pint a weekend, a cup of coffee through the week, I don't know, a bag of chips, if you're going to end up going for a chippy or something. We're talking about sacrificing very little to play a part in a collective effort that would see us put potentially an extra £250,000 into our football club. Because at the moment, £10 a year for a trust membership is generating 30 to 40k, and that's all we're putting in. Through the Supporters Trust, we have to push more incentives, and we have to come together and support them. Because if we don't, we're going to keep falling behind. Because at the moment, the club are running at what we would call an acceptable trading loss. An acceptable trading loss because it's making us a competitive team in League 2 and not a relegation fodder. Basically, that's it. So we're making that loss, hoping that something's going to come up. So as the benefactors of this football club, we need to step up, shape up, and sort it out. Because if we want to take this football club forward, we need to do it together. Unity. Together Stronger worked fantastically for the Welsh national team. Why can it not work for Newport County and its factioned supporter base? I ask you that. Thank you all for watching. Until the next time, cheerio for now, and as always, up the county.